Hello students, let's work on this problem. And it says, simplify the expression below. And they're giving us a big expression, right? Now notice everything that involves in this problem. I do see parentheses, which means more than likely I'm going to use the rule of power to a power. I do see parentheses and I see a dot in between, which means multiplication. That's the product rule. Then I see a line between the terms that makes a numerator and denominator. Therefore, I'm going to use the quotient rule. Very good. So this one is going to involve pretty much everything. So what should I do first? You always want to take care of the exponent outside parentheses. It's like kind of order of operations, right? So let's go ahead and work on that -1 that is outside the parentheses, which means that -1 is going to affect everything inside the parentheses. Okay? So let's rewrite that. So let's go ahead and underline what it says. It says simplify. Yeah, that basically means that from the whole problem that is given to me, I should end up with something smaller, right? Or at least that it looks smaller. Same, which is equivalent, but not as long as that one, right? So let's start with the -1. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take care of the -1. Is that correct? So I'm going to go ahead and write down everything else. So it's going to be 6k to the 4th power z to the -2nd power over 8 z to the 2nd power times, and I'm going to go ahead and work on that numerator. Now the denominator, I'm going to leave it as it is. Are we clear? Okay, so let's work on my numerator. That means that my 2 will be raised to the -1 power. And if you remember, anytime that we have a negative exponent, we're going to rewrite it as a fraction. When I rewrite it as a fraction, now that will make it a +1 as an exponent. And that, if you want to, is the same thing as 0.5, just to avoid the fraction, right? Let's go to the next term, k. K has a 1 power, or to the 1st power, and I'm going to raise it to the -1 power. Is that right? Do you remember the rules that we talked about a few minutes ago? So we have something that it says power to a power. So let's write it down over here. Power to a power. What do I do when I do see parentheses and I'm raising it to another power? Well, all we gotta do is multiply. Very good. And we multiply the exponents. Keep this in mind. This is going to be a lot of rules that we're going to apply here. So I'm going to multiply 1 times -1. I get k to the -1 power. What about z? Well, z is raised to the -2 and again to the -1. Is that correct? So now I need to apply that power for power rule, and that I will get -2 times a -1 gives me a +2. Are we clear? So I'm going to rewrite everything over here. And right next to that, I'll go ahead and write down k to the -1. And after that, it will be z to the 2nd power. Now, notice how I am not writing that k to the -1 power on the denominator, because we're not finished. So we have a lot to go, so don't worry about that. Okay? So what should we do next? Well, what about if I multiply numerator by numerator and denominator by denominator? Yes? So for that, I would need to apply the product rule. So let's see if you remember what to do in the product rule. When we talk about product rule, it means that my bases are the same, and all I need to do is add the exponents. Very good. So we're going to add the exponents. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So let's start with a coefficient. I'm going to multiply 6 times 0.5, which gives me a 3. Okay. Then I'm going to take care of the base with a k. So k was raised to the fourth power. Is that right? But then on the second side, I have k to the negative 1 power. But I'm supposed to add, so I'm going to say plus negative 1. Don't forget the negative 1, right? And that will give me k to the third power. Everybody with me? Okay, let's check out the z. How about z? Well, z was to the negative 2, but I need to add the one on the right side, which is actually a positive 2. And that will give me a z to the 0 power. I can leave it as a z to the 0 power, or I can put a 1. It's up to you. Okay, it will not make any difference. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to write down the next step over here. So I took care of the numerator. Is that right? So that will give me, so we'll write down my new answer here, right? So I got 3 times k to the third power times z to the 0 power. My bad. Z to the 0 power. Very good. Now let's take care of the denominator, okay? But we're still going to continue with the same rules, right? So I am going to multiply 8 times 2. Those are my coefficients, and I do get a 16. Very good. So I'm going to write down 16 right here. What about the other two? Well, I cannot multiply. I cannot use the product rule because they don't have the same base. So I'm going to write it down as it is, right? So I'm going to write down z squared and k to the fourth power. Are we clear so far? All right, so let's do the next step. So what's my next step to do? Well, I do think that I need to do the quotient rule now. This is a long question, right? Quotient rule. And what do I do in the quotient rule? I am going to subtract the exponents. Very good. So let's take care of that. So 3 and 16, I cannot do anything with that. So that will stay as a 3 on the numerator. I cannot simplify. And a 6 on the denominator. What about the k? Okay, so I'm going to write it down here because I don't want to mess up the other side. K to the third power minus, make sure that you don't get confused. It's to the fourth power, right? So I'm going to say 3 minus 4. And that gives me a k to the negative first power. And how about the z? Well, z was a 0 minus 2. Is that right? So I get z to the negative 2 or negative power. Notice how both of those are negative. So when I write the answer, I cannot write them on the numerator. They go on the denominator. Very good. So k to the first power and then z to the second power, because remember that I do not get my exponent negative no more. It's actually a positive exponent. Look at the answer choices. And yes, the answer should be a letter A. If you were able to do this one on your own, guys, like following me, that's pretty good because we got all the rules in there.